journey of self-publishing, we ask that you don't use flash photography or record anything. And then if you could leave feedback at the end, that'd be super, super cool. Fill it out and give it back to us. You'll be entered to win a ticket to next year's Expo. If you use the app, you get 2 entries. So do it.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Good evening. It's the first day of the Comic Expo. Woohoo. Who's here for the whole thing? Yeah, there we go. That's awesome. So yeah, my name's Colin Lavery. This is Beth Wagner. As you guys knew, this is about self-publishing and kind of the journey and how to get there. My name's Con, and I started self-publishing back in 2012 after a long process of writing and finding an editor and learning the steps of actually finishing a book. And what I learned was best summed up by another author, and he said your book is like your entry ticket into the industry. So that kind of opened up my eyes, because it's a big feat to get a book finished. And when you actually have it, then you can actually start participating in the industry and getting to know other people and networking and whatnot. So yeah, I started in 2012, and since then I have released 5 self-published novels, and still going and releasing more in the following years. And that's a brief introduction to myself, and I'll let Beth give an introduction to her.
Hi, I'm Beth Wagner. Just as a quick background though, Con actually, he's more literary novels and I do comics. And we basically had similar ideas. I mean, for me, I started off with wanting to do self-publishing my own comics in order to kind of have something to show people and be like, okay, here's my work, here's an example of the comics. And also as an exercise in being able to do it. There's some differences that from literary novels to graphic novels and comics. So we can kind of demonstrate the difference between the two of them. I've been self-publishing since 2006. And there's been a lot of changes in the industry over the years, and so yeah.
Yeah, so we both have expertise in 2 different areas, comic books and literary. And this panel is going to be very much a Q&A style, so we're going to keep it pretty naturally flowing. So we'll ask each other questions, and if you have questions, definitely raise your hands. Out of curiosity, who here is here for comics? All right.
Okay, perfect.
And who is here for books, like literary? Awesome. Anyone into anything else, or is those kind of the main 2? Oh, cool.
Yeah. Well, and there is a lot of crossover. Like there's things that are different, and there's things that are the same. With obviously you have some different aspects in that there's more images in comics, but then when you have like the literary, there's some things that are just exactly the same that you can kind of work with.
Because with self-publishing, the tough thing with it is you end up wearing all of the hats, and you have to juggle between the production, the actual creation of the piece, and then your marketing as a product. So you have to become a business entrepreneur now to get it out there. So to get the ball rolling, I would like to ask Beth, what was it like making your first published release?
It was really, really daunting. Well, not even. It was exciting because I went to school for graphic communications at NAIT, and so I ended up not thinking that any of this was going to help me later on. And when I started actually having to go through the process of like the drawing, the writing, and everything, because there's different ways you can self-publish, and one of the nice things about comics is that you can go from anywhere from like an ash can where you're folding and stapling and going to Kinko's to doing a high-end production run where you're sending off your stuff to a printer. Now, if you're sending your stuff off to a printer, you either need to have background in graphic design yourself, or else you need to have somebody who can do that for you, because you're going to need to have your files all set up.
Yeah, and that's a big thing, is finding the right print shops to work with. And from the literary sense, there's a lot of print shops in the States that offer print-on-demand services, such as Amazon's CreateSpace. Now, things are a little bit different in the past year with the currency exchange rate, so it's really expensive to go through the States, and you're almost better off finding something in Canada now. still have to pay shipping or find it locally. So you have to learn to talk with print shops and set up your files for print formats. And we also included some notes. You might notice them throughout the different chairs.
Yeah, we weren't sure.
Definitely feel free to grab some. There's definitely some in the front as well, so at the end of the panel. So we'll have some summary notes for you to take home. And something that works both in the comics and the literary publishing is your artwork files, like Beth was mentioning. You have to make sure they're proper format. One of the formats is CMYK versus RGB. Who's familiar with those types of terminologies? 2, 3?
Okay. Yeah, and a lot of the comic people will know that.
Yeah, and yeah, go ahead.
It's okay. Yeah, the biggest mistake a lot of people make is thinking that they're interchangeable. But for those of you, yeah. As you can tell, Con also has a background in graphic design, so those of us who do that, you know the difference. I've spoken with a lot of comic artists, like who work in the industry themselves, and they would try and take their artwork that they had done digitally and then try and print it out without taking into account the CMYK. They were working with an RGB file, and printing ruined. Like, it looks muddy because of the way the files are set up. You have to understand that. If you don't feel comfortable understanding that, then you need to be able to have somebody on hand, and feel free to delegate to a graphic designer or somebody who can help design that. Then you have to start looking at hiring. Like, you can either do it all yourself, or you can look at having to delegate. Just keep in mind though, with each person you hire, you're divvying up your money that much more. But you can do it.
Yeah, and especially with the color formats, and that's ultimately what RGB and CMYK is for, is that one works well for computer screens and the other works well for print. And some print shops, especially in the literary sense, you'll get slight variations in your color tones, and some of that's out of your control. And this is why when you see some of the bigger print runs that do like a few thousand at a time, you get a little more control, because all 3,000 of those are going to look the same and be identical. With print on demand, lots of pros to it for allowing you to only like order 50 or 10, but you're going to have slight variations. There's been times where I've ordered books for like this one, for example, and some of it's been chopped off and the colors are slightly different. So something to keep in mind with print on demand, and then you just have to kind of expense that as a casualty for one of your books. But that's something to keep in mind with artwork, is your color format. DPI is another one. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
About DPI?
Yeah.
Well, for me, DPI. Yeah. One of the worst things that you can find is another one. There's so many bad things that can happen. So many bad things, and I've done them all. So, but DPI is not converting to the correct DPI and starting off with the right DPI. If you're, depending on how you're scanning in artwork, you want to scan in at the highest amount you can, or ideally, and usually ideally that is between 300 to 600. I wouldn't really go beyond that, but it depends on how detailed the artwork is that you're going with.
And DPI is dots per inch,
Yeah.
for anyone who's curious, and that's essentially on your screen monitor you've got pixels, and with per inch means how many pixels are compact into a single inch.
Yeah,
so at 600 you get a lot more detail.
Yeah, and if you're working with Adobe Photoshop, sometimes it'll automatically start out in 72 DPI, and that's when we all cry. And what you want to do from there is just immediately go to your image file size and double check and make sure that it's at 300. always, at least 300.
Otherwise, it'll end up being like pretty fuzzy, and then the artwork is hard to look at. It's blurry and doesn't show the quality of work that you put in. Yeah.
Or pixelated, yeah. That's the other thing can possibly happen with it as well. Yeah, if you're using Manga Studio, that's a whole different matter. It's a little more all-in-one. I'm not as familiar with that one. I usually, because my background is in design, I do the Photoshop, InDesign, and then go from there. But I would recommend for people who are working with comics to start using Manga Studio. It's easy to use, and it's very robust.
Manga Studios?
Yeah, Manga Studio.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a really, and they often have sales on, because normally it's about it can get kind of pricey, but they'll have these random sales where it'll be like $30, and that's it's a big difference between that and when you're going with Photoshop and Adobe, which is like, you know,
like $90 a month or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did what would you say is better about Photoshop versus Mecha Studio?
Well, Photoshop is more broad. I mean, you can use it for it's more of a workhorse, and it is a larger program. It's got more things you can do with it. It was around longer, so they've done a lot more to implement. There's a lot more plugins for it. There's a lot more things like that. Manga Studios is really more for just for comics. I mean,
More specialized.
it's very specialized. It's specifically set up for comic book people and manga people.
Oh, cool. So I've got another question. So when you first got into it, how did you go about shopping around to get your comics actually printed?
Oh, well, basically I was on forums. I mean, I was on forums back in the day. So I fluked out, and I was able to interact with a lot of comic professionals at the time. And so I would find out what they were doing. Some of them were doing self-publishing at the time as well, in addition to working with the industry. And so they'd start talking, and the biggest thing they came up with was Kablam. That's down in the States. They operate out of Orlando, Florida. So it's now become a lot more challenging to ship it up, because when it hits the border, there's all kinds of excise, and it's a little more. Yeah, we've kind of been hit pretty hard with the exchange rate.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie.
Kind of why it's also good to go find Canadian-related print shops. And so, do you still use Kablam, or do you?
I do, but I do a lot more. I do a lot more of my own printing now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's just for that reason. If I wanted to do a larger print run, I know some shops, in Canada that I would use. Sips is a good one. But I would also recommend, if you can find a print shop that's pretty comic friendly. There's lots of people here, and having a really strong graphic design and print industry here in Alberta, that's solid here. I mean, that's where I grew my graphic design chops.
Yeah, same, and that's why you always have to kind of interview the print shop to see what type of things they can print. When you talk to them, see if they do book bindings and what type of paper quality they have, because some print shops just don't have stuff in stock. So if you really want to go local with print shops, ask them some questions such as paper stock, pricing, quantities, because some of them actually don't even do small runs. So they'll only make you do a large order, and then you have to dish out that cash, and it can be a really pricey investment. So things to think about. But then there are some of the other services where, like in the States, like Kablam or Amazon create space for actual novels. So yeah, you got different options for that. Another good one is Blurb. They are definitely more towards comics and photographers. That's their specialty. Blurb.ca, and they are a Canadian company, do print on demand, tons of different book formats, really great quality printing. And fun fact is I used them by mistake for my very first novel run. So the books look great, the paper was a really good quality, but when you're printing books that are this thick, that gets really pricey really fast versus comics that are 30 pages. So I ended up losing money on every sale. That was a mistake I made, with the very first run. And then I did more research, and after that first run of 100, I found Amazon's Create Space and went through them. And their printing quality is not as good, but it doesn't matter as much with text, because it's all about the story and the words, so I don't have to worry about DPI and dots per inch. And not even as much with CMYK, because it's all text and black and white. So it's a little different for me, and they also offer templates. Some of these print shops will offer Word documents or InDesign files that are ready for you to place your book and have it ready for their format, so they don't have to ask questions about it, and it just goes straight to the printers. So that's another one to think about. Before we go on, does anyone have any questions in the back of their mind that have been they've been waiting to ask anyone? Yes.
When you go to a print shop, and because you were saying that you had one batch, and you said it was kind of like a fad batch or whatever, does the print shop actually print off like a sample before it does the printing run, or at least give you an idea of how it's going to look before it does kind of the rest of your order, I guess, in the nutshell?
Yeah, they do. So, particularly that would happen to be with an Amazon run, and they do give you a proof copy, so you can choose to order it. So I always, after a new book, I get the proof copy, and then you sit down and you look through it, make sure everything's okay. And with the print on demand, there's always going to be slight variation regardless of what you do. So you have to, if you're doing self-publishing, you have to make sure you design the book layout to be flexible to those mistakes. So you don't want any elements too close to the edges, otherwise it's going to get cut off. So you want to make sure everything's got what's known as a good margin space, and that way they'll be safe. A few things of self-publishing that is tough is the spine. I've had the spine shift ever so slightly, and I'm a graphic designer by trade as well, so when the text is slight off-centered, it just really irks me. But there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to accept that's the nature of print on demand and small print runs. So, yeah.
Sorry, I have a second question.
Sure,
Sorry,
fire.
I'm doubling
Yeah.
You're saying that some of the software is like for the actual graphic design part. Is there one that's better for literary novels per se, like for the graphic design side of things?
For like doing the book artwork?
Yeah.
No, they're all kind of the same. Wait, which one? Scrivener? I haven't heard. What's
What?
Scrivener?
You haven't heard of
No.
Scrivener? Oh
Alright,
my god,
like
okay.
that.
So here's the thing. So I also do a little bit of, I'm starting to dip my toes in literary novels as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so one of the things that is a godsend and is really, really handy is Scrivener. It's an all-in-one encompassing, like it's a beautiful thing because from start to finish. You start off with your ideas, and for those of you who use the index cards, you can write down, you can write in Scrivener. It has these little like index cards in the program that allow you to put down all your scenes or however you're breaking down the novel. Yeah, and then you have like a section for your characters. This also works for comics. So this is like all encompassing for everybody because you can do comic scripts on it, and you can also do literary novels. Plus, it has a compile feature where it will output it to your print on demand.
Oh, no way.
Specifically for
Nice. And does that help with some of the artwork too, like prepping the novel covers
you
or
can
something?
do that.
Oh,
It has
wow.
a special cover section as well.
Oh, cool. So yeah, there's one.
And that
Yeah.
one's also really affordable at a nice $69. Plus, you have a 30-day trial period. So
And it's $69 to buy, like it's not a subscription.
buy.
Oh,
No
nice.
subscription.
Okay.
You buy it, you own it, and there are
Okay, yeah, there's one. And if you're on a super tight budget, there's always things like GIMP, which is a freeware-based Photoshop.
Yeah.
So you have to learn some of the tools, but yeah, then there's other ones such as GIMP that might, or Scribbler that might help
yeah.
as well.
Yeah, I highly recommend that. Everybody in this audience could do it, including you.
I'll have to check it out.
You better check it out. I highly recommend it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Does anybody else have any questions?
How did you start kind of advertising your work as a startup? Or did you ever advertise your work before? Did you ever advertise your work before you started self-publishing in any way?
That's a good one.
Oh,
Sorry.
did I ever advertise? Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm deaf, so
Oh
I
yeah.
don't.
Did you start advertising? Like, how did you get into advertising your work? Did you like before you self-published? Or?
I know what you should do and what I did do. They're two different things.
Big difference, yeah.
For me, I started back like a million years ago, and when I started, it was a really different time period. I'm based out of Vancouver, and basically, I ran into a person, and she was saying, "Oh, well, there's this like great little comic convention." And it's not really a convention per se, but it's kind of like almost like a flea market. And she's like, "Well, you should just come by and bring your comics." And so there was no advertising at all. And it was back then when I was starting, there was mostly live journal. There wasn't really WordPress wasn't really a thing. Now, if I were to start putting out my next book or whatever, I would start by promoting it through Facebook and through Twitter and starting to build up kind of a momentum that way. Also through my blog. That'd be the other thing. I mean, you just start, saying, oh, by the way, and all you have to really do is just seed it in there, saying, I have a book that's coming up, and wait for it. It'll be coming soon. And then once you have a better idea of when it's happening, you can kind of give them a date, and then go from there. But you have just put something out, so you can kind of give a good idea about that.
Yeah. I just brought up this book last Wednesday. So something that it's known in the writing industry just called your author platform, but it applies to everyone. And your platform basically means how you distribute your news and your work, and that includes social media, that includes blogs, that includes your newsletter, your professional network connections. Generally, that would be an Excel spreadsheet of managers at bookstores, media people, like who runs a magazine. You keep a huge list of all your different contacts, and when you're planning a release, this is all stuff I learned through the process. The first release was not quite like this, but yeah, this is how you would normally go about it. And you, like Beth was saying, you let people know through your blog and social media the progress and ultimately the release date of your novel or comic book. And you pick a location to launch it, and you generally want it to be an event, so you either do a live reading or a speaking about how the piece came to be, because people are curious about that. That's why they're showing up to the event when you're having a release. So yeah, those are kind of the best ways to advertise, is have your platform and distribute it through there, and having what's known as a social media campaign. That's another one. So you've got these little departments within your platform: your social media campaign, your newsletter campaign, your blog, and your other media relations. So how can you get in touch with magazines, other bloggers, reviewers, YouTube channels, local radio, those types of things. So you would also want to put together a press kit. These are incredibly helpful. And a press kit is generally either a folder on your computer, a Word document, and some photos. And you email that to media people, so magazines, the news, and it would describe you as an artist. So you'd have your bio in there, your portrait shot, the cover of the work, maybe a few samples, not too many, and a description of the new release. So describing what it is and what inspired it. And you email that out to the media. And sometimes you can go to magazine websites and see their contact email, and they'll have different departments for different parts of the magazine. So you want to find like a local arts section or a literary section, and you want to email that person. And yeah, that's the best options to advertise your new piece of work.
One of the other things you can do, if you're for comic people, you can do a bunch of different things as well. You can, for comic people, you can look at indie-friendly comic shops. You can also think outside of the box as well. Some of the things that we've done in Vancouver that work really, really well is to find an art gallery that's also willing to put on stuff, because this is the nice thing about comics, is that they're a very visual art form as well as literary. It kind of has a little bit of both. So you can kind of think outside the box and start going in those directions as well. But your main people are going to be your comic shops, and so you're going to want to really communicate with all the comic book shops in the city. For me, I do things like I go to conventions here, and then I start talking to people who are showing at shows, talking about, well, how indie-friendly are you? Would you be willing to put a book in? Because you kind of have to do your own distribution and your own. You have to be able to talk to retailers and be able to go, hey, would you like my book? Would you be willing to put my book in your store? And yeah, like I said, for launching a comic book, it's a little bit different. I mean, I've seen comic book readings. That is a thing that also happens as well. You can, like I said, you just have to really, really kind of get a little broad, get a little more creative, and think about other ways you can express your work and kind of show it off to people. And like I said.
Yeah, to further add to that, I tend to do kind of the old school marketing and go to bulletin boards, and I print out a bunch of posters, put them all up all over the city, postcards in cafes, bookstores, promoting the book launch. So you want to make it a big deal, so you want to toot your own horn, because no one else is going to do it, so you have to kind of do it for you.
You have to think about the people, where, like, who you want to have reading your book, be it comic or be it, what is your audience? Find out where would your audience be, and then you can do things like put up pieces, like little ads and stuff like that, in places where you want your audience to look at it and buy.
Yeah, and I'm from Edmonton, so I tend to have all my launches at Happy Harbor Comics. Jay's super great. Yeah, he let me have my very first launch, so I've been very, very loyal. And he's a great example because he loves grassroots comics and he supports indies and everyone starting up and moving onwards. And that's why I always have my launch there, because in general, people coming to Happy Harbor Comics also have a more open mind. So not only am I bringing my own fan base, but walk-ins come in too, who are regulars to Happy Harbor Comics, and they're used to Jay putting on different events at that store, and they're generally interesting, so they want to see what it's about. So you want to probably find an independent store to have your new release launch at, because they're generally going to be a little more accepting, and the audience coming to that are a little more open-minded to someone getting into self-publishing. Yes?
Also, to build on the Happy Harbor thing, if anyone here is from Edmonton and does comics, every second and fourth Thursday of the month from 7 to 9 p.m., there's a comics creator meeting. Where
Nice.
it's generally anywhere from like 10, 20, we've had 25 people show up at times.
I am really hard. Like, that's my thing, because that's when I was at the Edmonton convention, like way back in like 2008.
Oh wow.
I went up to Jay and I'm like, Jay, and he took me on, and so I've been sending. I ship my comics out to him every 6 months.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he's really great. Yeah, this is not supposed to be a big Happy Harbor podcast, but
Yeah.
they are indie friendly, and they take shipments of books.
They're not sponsoring us.
No, they're not.
We just really like Happy Harbor. So.
Yeah, we really do.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Did you come up with your own marketing checklist, or did you find a resource for like a marketing plan?
Kind of a mix of both. I've talked to a lot of different authors that have gone both traditional publishing and self-publishing. They've given me lots of feedback. I read a lot of author blogs to see what they did successfully, what didn't work well for them. And there was also a book called A Writer's Guide to the Literary Agent. So it's telling you how to make your book attractive to an agent and make them want it. And this is where I learned a lot of the terms about author platform and building up your network and stuff. So it's been a kind of a hybrid mishmash of everything. And there's actually also one of those books for comics as well, actually for illustrators, but same kind of thing where it's finding an agent or a publisher, and one's for the literary, one's for illustrators. And they're on Amazon and they release it yearly, and it's basically a giant index of agents that would be interested in your work, and it tells you what they're like, what type of work they prefer, where they're located, and their contact info. And the beginning gives you a bit about how to approach an agent. So being self-published, you can go to an agent. It's actually generally pretty helpful to find one, because they're going to have a network that you can't access, and credibility, because they represent a bunch of other artists, and they other media is going to take them more seriously.
It's a little different with comics. Oh.
What were the names of those books?
Literary Guide to Agents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that would be Illustrator's Guide to Agents as well. That's another one on Amazon. Yeah.
It's a little bit different with comics. I mean, for marketing, you're gonna go. It's entire some of it's the same, and that's the nice thing is that a lot of people who already do comics don't really take enough from the literary world. I mean, because the literary world has been around a lot longer than comics,
Yep.
and so there's things that you can actually pull from there that comics aren't using right now. And that's why, I mean, and that's the nice thing about comics is a kind of a fairly new media, relatively.
I'm gonna add on to that. I love underground music. So what I actually do for a lot of the books is I look at how these indie bands are promoting their stuff, because music is really on the forefront when it comes to taking advantage of new technologies to get their work out there. So just try taking a look at some bands and see what they're doing. They are going like self-published more than any other artist in any other industry because, yeah, record labels kind of suck. So take a look at what they're doing and get creative. Like sometimes they give little samples away. You could do that with a short story or something, or a short comic.
Well, yeah, and that's what I do. I mean, I have a couple where you just on a weekend you just do a quick ash can where it's like this piece of paper that's maybe folded a couple times and you've got a couple of illustrations to make a general story. And it's like, because that was my first one. My first one is basically that. I created the comic just so that I could have something to hand out to people and use it as a business card going, hey, I make comics, here you go. I make comics, here you go. I sell it now, but I don't sell it for very much. And that's kind of the point, is trying to, because my goal, and everyone has different kinds of goals, but my goal is to try and get as many eyes on it as possible. Other people have different goals, and that's basically your main thing, is you have to figure out where you want to go with your work. Do you want to be famous? Do you want to be world renowned? Do you want to make a lot of money? There's no real wrong. I mean, some people will tell you, oh well, money, wow, but that's your own thing. I mean, if that's the thing you want to do, then you're going to have to look at how you're going to accomplish that, and then you have to be willing to make that business plan for that.
Yeah, to add on to that too, like what you want to do, if you have to be realistic when you're self-publishing. So if you want to write horror novels and you love splatterpunk, which is generally like a lot of gore, you're going to have a pretty niche market, versus if you wrote a 14 and up fantasy novel. You're going to have a much broader audience because you can go to schools, you can go to libraries, you get kids that are in their 13 or 14 all the way up to adults that enjoy that, because there's a lot of adults that enjoy teen novels. But if you're writing, a splatterpunk novel, and some people that love it are super passionate, but it's a niche market. So things to think about as well, versus again when it comes to making money versus exposure versus following your true passions.
Actually, you just touched on something.
Good.
Libraries.
Yeah.
Libraries. Guys, people, you need to start, if you guys are putting out your books, one of the best things you can do, even if you're a comic book creator, go to the library. Go to the library, start talking to the librarians, see if you can get your books in there. And also do things like talks. I've done some talks at libraries. They are a fantastic thing. I mean, I'm kind of lucky because it's a Vancouver Public Library. They have a whole entire section of like zines and comics in there. And it's a nice big library there. So look at that. It's also a great entranceway for literary novels as well. You start talking to them about I have this book coming out. You'd be surprised. You may actually be able to get that in there that way. And being able to put talks on and meet the author kind of thing. That's or you can even do kind of like what we're doing here. Have some sort of panel where you're sitting and talking about a topic, and it's a way of getting people in front of you and being able to introduce your novels or your comics.
Yeah, because you are your own manager, so you have to become the public figure. And some people aren't quite as comfortable doing talks in public, speaking in public, but great advice I was given from my old boss, because he was in theater for a long time, and he said to me that you don't have to be actually con when you're up on talking in front of people. You have to like put on stage con. So you're essentially wearing a persona or a different act, and that way it's a lot more comfortable when you're talking rather than being the you who's at home hanging out with your cat or dog watching Netflix. That's probably where you're in the most vulnerable state, versus when you're out in public you have to put on a persona, because you're talking to people and you want them to get some information and absorb it. So that's something I found helpful when you're doing talks, and practice, lots of practice. even doing dry runs with a group of friends, get 3 of them together, let them have some drinks, so it's a little fun, and then they'll give you honest feedback. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any other questions?
No, that's fine, we can keep going. You mentioned that you're also working on a novel. Want to shed some light on that and how it came to be? Because I find it actually a really cool story.
Okay, for me, I'm kind of at least third generation artist. My grandmother, she did paintings and whatnot. My father, he was a writer. He's also a journalist. And I say was because he's no longer with us. Actually, ironically enough, today is his birthday.
Oh.
But he wrote for most of his life. He got published in the Western Producer, and he used to work at Star Phoenix in Saskatoon. And he wrote, over his lifetime, he wrote 53 novels. Now, he didn't get a chance to publish them yet. He published one of them right before he died. He died before they actually got a chance to launch the book, so I ended up having to launch the book myself.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so, and then from there, I inherited his whole entire literary estate. So now I'm working on trying to self-publish that, which thankfully I have the background from the comics, which I'm kind of pulling over to that. So yeah, and that's where I'm going. I'm trying to learn the literary and find out how it's different and how it's the same with comics. And there's a lot of things you can kind of pull from both.
Yeah, and because you've got the background of making the comics and distributing them, you can apply that to books.
Oh yeah, and I'm thankful that I actually did the actual printing, the folding, the stapling myself, because it gives you a really great an eye and an idea of how the physical books go together, and so you end up thinking about these in the back of your mind as you're printing and producing books. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Something else I can share as well, think about if you're going self-publishing, you can also approach it as being your own publisher of your own work. So you can register yourself as a business, and that works as tax write-offs as well. So opposed to doing it yourself, and then you have to, it gets really dicey when you're not registered as a business and figuring out taxes and you're selling things to stores and whatnot. So something to think about as well. And stores will also treat you differently when you're being represented from a company. So for mine, for example, it's called Reveal Books, and that's what I had for the booth here. It makes it a little easier for people to find it. And because it's titled Reveal Books, they know what it's about. It doesn't just say Con Lavery and people like, who's this guy? So it makes it a little clearer of what it's about.
However, with comics, now
True,
I'll be like,
true.
bam.
Yeah, no, it's true.
With comics, though, it's a bit different because I know, because I started off with my own imprint, which was Moongate Studios,
Yeah.
and that kind of got, people were having problems trying to find me because they get to know me, the person, and as a comic creator, I find that your name tends to sell the books. Like everybody knows Kurt Busiek, Jack Kirby, John Romita.
Matt Jones is around, you see him, yeah.
Exactly. So for that you have much more of a personal brand, and you can still have a studio name if you're doing comics, but then that would usually be if you have more than one person working on the book. If you have more than one person working on the book, then I would recommend a studio name. But if there's just you, I would recommend just going with your own name, because it helps you build you as your brand. Because in comics, it's more you are your brand. If you watch people, you go to a comic book store, you look for either the artist or the writer, depending on what your interests are in the comics. So it's really important to build that brand rather than trying to build a studio brand. Unless, like I said, there's multiple people working on the books.
Yeah, and it's very true, because you are still the independent artist and people want to know who you are. So that does work for both literary and in the comic book world. So and that goes back to what we were saying about building a public figure. And that's what you have to really portray with your platform when you're advertising and presenting yourself to the public. Business side, registering as business, that's more for the technicalities of just distributing it, but for the marketing purposes, you do want to present yourself as a person, because they are going to start to recognize you. And when you have a Facebook page and you have a Twitter, and you should have your profile photo, so you have to get used to looking at yourself quite a bit. So something else to think about.
Yeah, and that's universal. You need to have the photo. Whether it just comes down to, at the end, you want to have a photo, not the goofy. If you're a comic book creator, not the goofy comic. You need to actually have. Eventually, there has to be a picture. There should be a picture. You just gave me another idea.
Yes.
ISBNs.
That's another one. Do you want to tackle that, or do you want to?
Well, we can do it together. One of the nice things about here in Canada, because you'll listen to a lot of podcasts and you'll hear people talking about ISBNs and having to buy them, and it's so expensive. But we're very, very lucky here in Canada because we're able to get all of our ISBNs for free. Now, here's the other thing though, and this is where it gets a little bit dicey, because for literary novels, you have your book.
Yeah.
And your book is your ISBN, and you're done.
Pretty straightforward.
Comics, though. Comics are another matter, because you have your floppies where you're maybe having like a single issue, and then if you're collecting into a trade, you're going to need another ISBN for that. Now, however, to be fair, the only reason why you need an ISBN is if you want to get it into a bookstore, and you can potentially get it into a bookstore. And another thing you can also do is you can still go through, what is it? I want to say Sparks.
For ISBNs?
No, for getting into Ingram. That's what I meant.
Oh,
Ingram
Ingram,
Spark.
yes. Ingram's a good one, yeah.
Because you can use that for comics and you can use it for literary work.
Yeah.
And that is a key, because they actually do distribution into actual bookstores like Chapters and Indigo, stuff like that.
Yeah, cool.
So that's kind of key.
Yeah. And with the ISBNs, going to jump onto the literary side too. Same goes with the comics. If you've got your physical copy and then you've got an ebook copy, that's 2 ISBNs. So every version of your book needs to have a new ISBN. If you change print shops, so if it was printed in the States at Amazon, it's printed in the States. If you find something locally, you need a new ISBN to put on the back of the book, because now it's printed in Canada and it's a different edition. So something to think about, but again, because we're in Canada, we're super lucky it's free. In the States, it's expensive, yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I've seen some of them for like 500 and up for like 1 ISBN, US dollars. So it's like, what was the website for it again for getting it? It's like the government of Canada.
Yeah, it's the government of Canada. It's a little bit higgly, because you have to like tell them that you want a certain amount of ISBN numbers, and then you have to explain to them why you're getting it. Because especially if you're comics, you have to get if you're doing, and this is where it gets even more complicated if you're comics, because you have an ISBN number and then there's an EISBN number, I believe that's what it's called, and those are for periodicals. So if you're running floppies and you're doing like a monthly comic, then you're going to want to have it's a special ISBN for that. So you have to kind of decide, this is where so much comes into marketing and how you're printing and how often you're printing. Because if you're doing like one big trade, then you're good. You can kind of just have your ISBN and leave it. But if you're like I said, if you're doing like multiples, then you have to go with a periodical. And so even if you're doing like small, if you're doing small chapbooks for your literary novels, then
Yeah.
and you're doing like
editions like the Mr.
yeah.
Men books or something.
Exactly. Then you're gonna need to have a periodical ISBN number.
Because they're
instead.
issues, right? Rather
Yeah.
than kind of like a magazine, rather than like a finished piece of
Yes.
a graphic novel
Exactly.
or a big book or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If it has a spine, then you're gonna need an ISBN number. If it's folded and stapled,
Yeah. And you need one of the other ones.
yeah, an ISBN number, I believe that's what it's called. Don't quote me on that though.
Yes.
What's an ISBN and what are they for?
They are the barcode. So in back here, it allows the store to scan it, and a lot of the stores actually don't even archive based on title, they archive on ISBN. So it's just a numeric number that has it, and for the barcodes, there are some generators online. You can end up Googling ISBN generator, and it'll give you like a vector format, which is another digital file format, and you end up copying that and putting it into your overall spine file. So whether you're using Photoshop or something, you'll drop it in the far corner, and that's why it's nice to have a proof as well, because if you know someone who has a store, you can also see if they'll scan it for you if you work at a store to test it out. Because if you end up ordering a bunch and the ISBN barcode doesn't work, that's a problem. So definitely want to test that stuff out.
You also have to be careful when getting ISBNs because if you're going through print on demand, especially if you're going through places like Kablam or whatnot, you'll get proprietary ISBNs where it's just through that section. So you may think you have an ISBN number, but you only have an ISBN number for that imprint through that company. I know that Amazon has proprietary ISBN numbers that they'll give you as well.
Yeah, for like the Kindles, they call it like e-BSN or something.
Yeah, you have to be careful with that, and Kablam does that as well. But they're still good. I mean, but it's just it's very limiting. If you want to take that book elsewhere, then you have to get your own. You have to get a new ISBN number so you can supply your own. And I recommend supplying your own rather than having to go through and trying to like sort of. It seems easier, but it's not easier in the end. Is there any other questions before we're wrapping up?
Yes, fire.
How do you find editors before you're starting to publish?
There is the Writers Guild of Alberta. That's a great start. When you become a member, you get access to their catalog, and you find all sorts of writers, editors, and their specialties. So you definitely want to, when you're contacting these editors, you want to interview them as much as they're interviewing you, because it's kind of a two-way thing with your editor, and you want it to be a good relationship, because you'll have some editors that just don't like your writing style, so when they're editing, they're going to slash out everything. You want someone who understands what you want. I lucked out and found one through a friend of a friend, and before that I was interviewing some, and some of them will only edit syntax, some of them will only edit sentence structure, or a combination of both, and then you're looking at high costs. Some of them will charge like 5 cents per word, others will do $60 a page, so everyone has their own pricing format and editing capabilities that they're willing to offer. So definitely interview a bunch. I think I ended up interviewing 6 before I found the one that worked really well. So yeah, and who knows, you might just find someone who's a mutual friend and they have some editing background, or they went to university for it, and they're willing to work with you.
It's a little different with comics.
Oh, yeah.
Again, with comics,
Way
because
different.
it is, because it's a different beast. You kind of, because there's not, I mean, you could use, I have seen in the Writers Guild, there are people who do editing of comics. However, it's a little more challenging because most of the editing you're going to find is going to be geared towards literary. So you kind of have to look at going outside of the box yet again. You need to find somebody who has background in newspaper editing or magazine editing, because you want to be able to have somebody who's been able to do more of a layout and image/writing. It has to be kind of both. So you have to have somebody who has that eye, which means you're going to need somebody who has a background in either magazines or newspapers. If you want to look at historically how that used to be, they used to be newspaper editors and magazine editors. So you're going to want to find somebody with that kind of background.
Yeah, that makes sense, because you've got all the panels, and it has to flow into a proper story. So it's the visual storytelling on top of the literary storytelling.
Yeah, it's two-pronged visual, because you've got the words, and the words can also act as the visual. There's so much more to it than just the words on the page.
Yeah, because it's typography. Yeah, that's what it is.
It's typography, and it's also how the typography works with the images. Just look at Will Eisner stuff.
Yeah. Any other questions? Or? All right. Well, we are here all weekend, so definitely come and visit us. We're in 2 separate areas. You're at BMO, and I'm at the Big 4 upper level. So definitely swing by and ask us if you have any other questions or stuff.
Yeah, we're only too happy to give like tons of answers on many different things.
So thumbs up or not? Was this helpful for people?
Did it help anybody? Good.
Cool.
Good.
All right.
Yay.
Thank you.
Good.